Hello, this is Talking to Hawkins with me, Ian Hawkins. I first met my guest today when I was working at the UK's biggest speaker agency. And when a client needed a moderator and they had a difficult brief, this person was always right at the top of my list. A safe pair of hands, she always did her homework, and the client was always delighted at the end of it. Since then, we have stayed in touch and worked together on other projects, from crisis media coaching to writing a book together, and yet we are still friends. How did that happen? And of course, as well as being the go-to moderator for conferences on technology and finance and cybersecurity and all the rest, she now heads up Babaco Media and is a passionate fan of live music and cricket and football. The only thing that she cannot do is get the offside rule through my thick skull. Hello, Nadine Dereza. What a delight to have you.
Thank you, Ian. No, the offside rule is a real challenge for most people, so don't feel bad about that one. But one day you will understand it.
Well,
You're coming to
yes.
a QPR game with me soon.
That is that a promise or a threat? It could go either
Both.
way. Both. Okay. Tell me, so Babaco Media is your I was going to say new baby, but Babaco's been around for quite a long time. What was the need that you saw? Why did you set it up?
Yes, it has been. I think we're coming to over 16 years in business. It's had a different name, so the name was changed a few years ago. So that's probably why you're thinking it's relatively new, but actually it's about 5 or 6 years since we changed the name to Babaco Media. And the Babaco Media team originally came together really as a group of industry professionals because we'd all made a living as journalists, broadcasters, presenters, keynote speakers, media spokespeople like your good self,
Mhm.
producers and directors. And we continue to work in those roles. So we're still hands on working as presenters, journalists, and producers, and so on. And we know what is relevant. And at the time of setting up the business over 16 years ago, the idea originally came about because we felt that there was a gap in the market to help businesses manage their public image through media coaching, crisis communications, and presentation skills. And really, Ian, we were on a mission, weren't we, to share that lived experience with clients whose media and presentation skills are under the spotlight. So, in essence, what sets us apart is our personal hands on experience and expertise in everything we coach. And the approach and skills are based on our own understanding of what it takes to be a great communicator using the techniques and capabilities which we've used ourselves on a daily basis and that we've observed in others over the years.
Because it is a sort of collection of experts who you can put together whatever the needs are that you have in communications. You've got all sorts of people that have very specific answers to sometimes very specific briefs, haven't you?
Yeah, indeed. And I think it's having that eclectic mix of people to pull on, like your good self. You've been involved in a variety of projects over the years, but really, in recent times, the media and the events industry has really experienced a shift in thinking. And, during and immediately after the pandemic, there was a real dramatic swing from being interviewed in a TV and radio studio and presenting at live events to virtual experiences being the main form of communication. And although that's now swung back the other way with face to face experiences back in the lead, really the move to digital has increased the opportunity for more people
Mm.
inside a business to talk more to people outside than it ever has done before. But the expectations as a result of that, of both being analog and digital, as I like to call it, can be really daunting. And our coaching aims to make that task, I suppose, comprehensible, manageable, and not forgetting enjoyable. Often, particularly the night before you're about to be on site when you're delivering
Mm.
your media coaching, the spokespeople that you're about to run the program with are absolutely terrified and often send out a message saying, please have a restful night's sleep. Do not worry. We will take you through the process. We're in this together. And they often say that really allays that sense of fear. And
Mm.
actually, once things are underway, people do make feel really safe and confident and they enjoy the experience as well. But I think what gives me a lot of satisfaction is that our clients enjoy working with you and the rest of the Babaco Media team because they appreciate our approach, which is tailored to the specific needs of each client. And this enables us to guide, advise, and coach them as how best to communicate and present themselves to their own clients and
Mm.
audience. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think one of the most joyful afternoons I spent at work was in your company. You asked me to come along and be a hostile guest on a on a television sofa. And I spent hours just being obnoxious to this very nice CEO of this company that had booked us. I walked away thinking, oh, what have I said to this delightful man? And at the end of it, he said, that was really helpful and really useful. Thank you so much. And I thought,
Yeah.
really? Wow.
Well, that's partly because that was a crisis situation. Obviously, we can't reveal the client, but they were going on a round of redundancies.
Mm,
And, all our coaching is around being ethical and being authentic. It's not about lying to people.
no.
There are times when information needs to be released in a timely manner, but actually, we're not in the business of helping people lie and cover up cracks because you get found out. So we won't
Mm,
work with clients who are not telling the truth. We need to know exactly what's going on. But in that situation, we need somebody with a differing opinion because this person was going to be up against potentially a union member that was rightly so representing their members, and you really needed to sort of reflect that. So have that dichotomy of approach. And panel discussions are really boring if you haven't got
yeah.
differing opinions. So whether it's in the media or whether you're on a panel discussion at a live event, it's really good to have that alternative point of view and see how you as a client are going to deal with somebody saying something quite controversial or the polar opposite to you. And you did a brilliant job that
Yeah.
day.
I just went in saying, what's the worst thing I could say to this person at this point? Aha, here we go. Anyway, yeah, you make a really good point though. But since COVID came along, and of course we all have a camera in our pockets now, and there's an expectation that people will be on camera one way or another. And you've been a presenter for all your professional life. What's your background on that? You're not a nepo baby. What got you into the presentation business?
No, certainly not. Although, actually, my father worked for British Airways for nearly 40 years. So it was cheaper to go abroad than it was to stay at home. And we got dragged away at Christmas time. I was said, I just want to go to Blackpool one year. I don't want to go to another far-flung places. And this was the time when people just couldn't afford to travel. We couldn't afford to travel, but we had free tickets based on my dad was their
Hmm.
number one tennis and table tennis player. So we used to follow him around the world. And I think people thought that we were extravagantly rich by turning up at all these places. But, my mum and dad came from a very ordinary background, sort of working to middle class background, somewhere in between. On this one particular holiday, run by a tour operator that's still in existence, they had their own dedicated radio studio. And I was only 14. And I said, oh, can I get involved with that? And little did I know that I was actually going to be stuck in this radio station for an afternoon because I got locked in and nobody else could get in. So I had to basically host a radio show for 4 hours non-stop. I got the bug. And it sent me on a journey of thinking, God, I'd love to be in radio and TV. But it was a really long, hard-winded process because I didn't have the contacts. So I started off in hospital radio, into local radio, working with the Financial Times and SABC, South African Broadcasting Corporation. My first days of presenting was as a sports commentator. So I started off as QPRFC's DJ. I used to announce the goal scorers if I could see them.
Hmm.
And then from that, being a sports presenter as a female over 30 years ago was really tough. So I moved into business presenting and slowly built up that client base, but always felt that the corporate side of my presenting, so chairing conferences, hosting panel discussions, was just as important as my broadcast role. So I've always given it the utmost respect. And I think those two working side by side have come beautifully into Babaco Media now
Hmm.
because I've got the greatest of respect for business people, whether it's entrepreneurs, senior leadership teams who are trying to get their message across. And, as a result of my presenting experience and the rest of the teams, we can tap into that experience.
I mean, you say about being in QPR 30 years ago, and that's before social media as well. And You and I agree on this, which is there's a fabulous speech by Mary Beard about how women's voices are being shut up and how it's happened for thousands of years. And it's a bit depressing that hasn't really changed, at all in the last 30 years. In fact, it's probably got worse because there's more opportunity to be mean to people by social media, isn't there?
There is, but I have seen a sea change in the amount of females taking part in live events, panel discussions,
Hmm.
particularly in the last 3 to 4 years. So when I was around, I used to be the lone wolf, the lone female, hosting, chairing, because actually it'd be really embarrassing just to have, male, pale and stale without being
Hmm.
rude to, a
Me.
serious you, yes. Without being rude to you. And obviously I've got to be very conscious of that because I've got a son and I don't want to deny him and all his friends and everybody else opportunities. But for thousands of years, women have struggled, and actually we're getting our chance now. But I know men, particularly in the Gen Z age range, feel that they are disadvantaged by that. So we can't ignore that as well.
Hmm.
But actually, it's really important that we get those female voices through for diversity of thought and just to put some bit of equity and balance back into things again. But I used to have people writing hate mail to me saying that, women shouldn't be in sport. And actually being that sort of trailblazer, bleeding edge in many ways, was fine. And I've got quite a thick skin. But after 3 years, I thought, actually, do you know what? I want to really enjoy my work. And then
Yeah.
stepping into that business arena of business presenting and reporting and working for those major international channels, to the more recent one, CNBC, the largest business and news network in the world. It's an American channel, but obviously it's got a worldwide reach. Has been the making of me. And in fact, I've had a brilliant career, but I'm welcomed, I'm wanted, I have a voice in that,
Hmm.
and I feel respected and happy. And that to me was a fundamental choice I made and the right choice at the time. But I felt forced to make it, which is a shame, really. But, I don't want to look back. When you've got the likes of the BBC who set out, their agenda to make sure that they have 50-50 in terms of spokespeople, when they're putting programs together, have we got parity of esteem? Have we got equity when we're getting spokespeople on shows? So when you look at comedy panels, which you've been involved with over the years,
Hmm.
or question of sport or question time, you're seeing that there definitely is a shift in having a more balanced approach, and we don't want to lose sight of that.
Things don't change unless you make them change.
Yeah.
That's quite important. Let's get back to Babaco for a bit. Babaco Media. When do people come to you? What problems do they realize they have, and they realize they need your help?
Well, I'm sure you can imagine, clients come in all different shapes and sizes and different needs. So many approach us if they have new campaigns, they've got new launches or key messages that they wish to develop with us. And they come back year after year because
Mm.
they know they have the opportunity to develop, evolve, and rehearse their presentations, messages, or media interviews, really in a supportive learning environment. It sounds a bit glib, but that genuinely is the case. And we have clients across a variety of sectors, from the creative and cultural sectors right through to the tech sector and everyone else in between. And the feedback we get is they appreciate the attention to detail, the research we undertake, and the preparation we put in place to make the sessions truly bespoke. And there are so many other individuals and agencies offering presentation skills services, but not so many in the media and crisis media arena because you can't wing it, I'd say. So we primarily work with communications and PR teams who require face-to-face and virtual media training. And I don't like the word training, but when it comes to media training, that is the standard terminology. But actually it's more about coaching because you can train anybody. Training implies that you're training a dog, but it is the industry approach. But I'm trying to shift it to talk about it as media coaching for their spokespeople. And that includes CEOs, senior leadership teams, entrepreneurs. We have analysts, consultants, independent experts, curators, authors, academics, right through to celebrities and famous photographers, including working with Dennis O'Regan, who was David Bowie's photographer. And we got him ready for the worldwide media interest in Ricochet, his book on David Bowie, which you can just see behind me. Dennis will be very proud that I've got it there after
I
all
can
these years.
I can see a
Yeah,
lot of good books behind you.
yes.
Oh, wait a minute, what's that?
It's our book. I'll come to that. So,
Okay.
although we deliver presentation skills workshops and work as speaker coaches for really high profile people and teams, it's fair to say the lion's share of the work is around the media and crisis media. And I know you said what challenges
Mm,
people want, but before I address that, I think I need to say there are building blocks, and often people come to us just saying, "Oh, we want some crisis media." And I say, hang on a minute. The building blocks that we go through is really to be good at presentation skills. So, are you a good presenter? If you are a good presenter, are you good then ready to be a media spokesperson? So
mm.
once you're a great media spokesperson, and we've helped you in that area, you're then ready to tackle being a crisis media spokesperson. Very few people can end up being a spokesperson when there's a crisis, unless they are a complete natural and get away with it. You know, the pitfalls are numerous. And if you're not a good presenter, if you haven't been a media spokesperson, it's unlikely you're going to be able to handle a crisis in any sustained and professional kind of way.
It sounds to me that when people get in touch, it's not that they don't that well, they feel they might have an issue, but they don't know exactly what that issue is. And because of your expertise and experience, you can say, actually, you don't need this, you need more of that. Is that
Yes,
fair to say? Right. Okay.
it is. I mean, we had that definitely with a client that wanted crisis media. And in fact, we took them back to media
Mm.
training to begin with, and then came up with a bespoke set of crisis media scenarios, which was quite funny. Again, I can't say it was, but it's a large courier company. And the one we developed was talking about doorbell footage being captured of a courier
Mm.
criticizing the business. And they said, oh, that would never happen to us. And
Yes,
actually, literally 2 weeks later,
there it
I
is.
a courier come to my door, and he then launched into an attack on the courier company, not the one that we were media coaching for. I did say to my client, there you go. I could actually
Mm.
send this in to all your major networks, and this could be a major news story. So it just shows you in the unlikely scenario. So our team love developing what if scenarios, coming up with relevant but realistic scenarios that could happen. And sometimes it's thinking outside of what they think could be a crisis, because they can come from any angle.
Because people say, how do you plan for a crisis? And the
Yeah.
answer is,
Well, preparing for the unexpected is a key component of, leadership. And that's whether it relates to a sudden slump in the company's performance. You get a cyber attack, which is on the rise. You remember that crisis media session we held with 600 PR professionals.
oh
We
yes.
predicted several
Mm.
years ago that would be the number one concern for all boards. And they were really surprised that we made that statement. And it was, we hate to be wrong, but actually that has been one of the key concerns and one of the key issues that companies have had to deal with. And many of them have not had the tools and haven't been equipped to do so, and are having to either pay millions in ransom fees, or having to basically suspend operations. And sometimes that's been going on for days, weeks, or even months. And in one case of a big public institution, over a year. So it is, really important. But it also could be an environmental matter, a tragic accident. It could be a fire at a major hotel chain, or an aircraft flipping upside down on landing, as we've seen quite recently at Delta Airlines,
Mm.
which took the aviation industry by surprise. I mean, if it's going to go horribly wrong, it will go horribly wrong in the aviation sector, although they have an amazing safety record. But often how you deal with that crisis says a lot about you as a business. So crisis planning is much about preventing an incident becoming a crisis for your business or organization, as it is about managing a crisis expertly when it arises. But it's also about being able to confidently handle any challenging media interviews that could happen without notice. So we always say a crisis plan is a valuable asset, and the exercise to develop and produce one really gives you the opportunity to address the robustness of your current processes and procedures, And what we've found is flushed out all sorts of issues that people hadn't realised. And then they've got better at their processes, thinking, oh, crikey, I'm glad we undertook their exercise because it now means we need to now make this better or put in a different process. And the what if question is something that sits at the back of minds of many leadership teams. And if it doesn't, it should do.
Mm.
Yet the reality is that at some point, businesses, organizations are going to have to deal with a crisis. And the crisis plan is the one thing you wish you'd prepared for if you could have had your time again. I'm not overcooking it.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you what a Babaco Media program looks like, but I guess the answer is it looks like what the client needs it to look like, and
Yeah,
uncovers all of those, the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns as well.
indeed. And in fact, there isn't really a typical day, although there are some fundamentals. So, we want to get people good at radio interviews where you often have a longer time, although sometimes news can be cut short, or your story can be cut short by a breaking news story, or TV, where you'll probably have less time than on radio, but some of the mechanics apply. So some of the tips and techniques are the same in radio and TV, but obviously they're different as well. Being on TV is a visual medium, but then again, a lot of people are now recording radio programs as well. So there is a bit of a blending and a merging, but it's getting good at sound bites. Often it's easier, as you can see from the way I'm talking, it's easier to talk for longer than it
Yeah.
is to narrow it down to 20 or 30 seconds. It's getting people to express a message in a succinct way, which often people find really hard to do. But the other things that we sometimes do is help clients prepare for those high pressure environments, sometimes under that forgiving eye of the camera. So what am I talking about? Those high pressure environments, which include parliamentary select committees, regulators, public inquiries. We've even got clients ready for safeguarding adult reviews. And
Mm.
all of those can have a significant impact on your reputation. A good reputation, which we've always helped clients to safeguard, is that money can't buy factor that can carry a business or an organization through bad times. So in those kind of situations, we might well replicate and role play the hearing with an experienced panel. And this panel, depending on the situation, will be led by us and often made up of ex-MPs, KC, so King's Counsel, that's the senior barrister,
Hmm.
other barristers, journalists, and communication specialists. And, just to reiterate a point, it's not about lying your way out of the truth. It's about being authentic and ethical. So we'd ask challenging questions, scrutinise and help structure your answers. We'd advise and help shape the language and tone, strategy and techniques that will enable your spokespeople to be fully prepared and perform at their best. So, parliamentary select committees, regulators, public bodies, either in person or virtually, we pretty much help prepare and coach your spokespeople to be effective communicators. And we make sure, it's different from media training, that you're not bridging to your message, because there's
Mm.
nothing worse than, spokespeople when they're called by Parliament, that they come in with prepared speeches. But in terms of the media training or coaching, you're right, everything is tailored to the specific needs of each client.
Give me an example of what you might do with a client then.
Well, let's do it through the lens of one of our favourite clients we've worked with for over
Mhm.
10 years, and that's the British Library. And I was just adding up the other day, we provided media training and coaching on over 20 exhibition and shows, including Leonardo da Vinci and Mind in Motion. I won't name them all. Comics on Mars, Art and Anarchy in the UK. And there was a really lovely one that we did, Shakespeare in 10 Acts. And then a real big blockbuster, Harry Potter, A History of Magic, which was their most successful exhibition ever. And that had over 170,000 visitors and reaching new audiences for them. So it was a huge success. And in fact, that show was alongside a BBC 1 hour long documentary to
Mhm.
accompany the Harry Potter show. So we had to get their spokespeople ready for that as well. One of their flagship shows was Writing, Making Your Mark. And for that, we undertook, thorough preparation and research, and that included meeting with the press team, surveying their spokespeople, reviewing the communications plan, and reading all the relevant materials. including the book to accompany the exhibition. And then from that, we then developed a media training program which would tap into the key messages about the relevance of writing's evolution to the present day. So we created a sense of curiosity around how symbols and pictographs evolved to become the letters, alphabets, and tools for communication that we use today. We devised questions to cover the key angles and targeted audiences to help unpack the exhibition through the stories behind the objects. And we wanted to highlight the diversity of the collection to attract a real broad range of audiences with different interests. And then the second part was really the delivery of the media coaching to prepare the 4 or 5 curators who had different levels of media experience for all the print and broadcast interviews. And what we did, we worked in collaboration with the British Library press team and curators, which we often do. We want them there so that they learn from us, but they are crucial to the process. And we set up a studio on site and we created an environment that was both realistic and which put the spokespersons at ease so they felt confident to try things out. So we helped shape the key messages, bringing to life the stories behind the items they exhibited. And the key thing is we're balancing their knowledge with the media expertise that the Babaco Media team brings. And that helps to unpack the stories so they articulate them well. Because often they know so much that we want to like pick out the star items and what we know is going to appeal to the media. And we prepared the spokespeople for their interviews, the busy press launch day, where you've literally got back-to-back interviews. And, we get them psychologically and practically ready for it, drinking loads of water, making sure that they sleep well the night before, but making sure the homework's done so that they feel comfortable and confident on radio and in front of the camera. And this is then helped by them communicating the key messages in a conversational way that's clear and effective. And actually, going back to those days when we're on site, when we've created that studio, we test the key messages through a variety of broadcast interview formats as the messaging evolves throughout the day. So we're helping create the media sound bites. We've identified the news stories, the feature ideas, and the Q&As based around the interview practice sessions. So we're rehearsing as well more difficult and confrontational interviews, particularly when you may have items that people are challenging the provenance of and the history of and the diversity of. And so we need to identify those curveball or challenging questions they face and then help finalize those more reactive Q&As. And of course, all the interviews are recorded and then transferred to the media and press team. And, sometimes that's accompanied by a written report with constructive feedback on each person's performance. And that is a really good learning tool. It reminds them and reinforces the learnings from the media training day. So there's a lot in that. I've probably spoken at length, but actually that's days sometimes of preparation and then delivery as well. These things just don't happen like that. We don't like just coming up with off the shelf media training.
No, but it's a good example of how
Yeah.
how Babaco Media and the British Library has actually been a really strong collaboration. And then it's grown. And at the end of it, people do have more confidence in themselves and the whole organization. It lifts the whole organization, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And a lot of the spokespeople, not just at the British Library, but other organisations will say, I was really nervous the
Mm.
night before, the day before, but actually I've now taken on more presentations, more speeches. It has been such an increase in my confidence. I never thought I would end up with these extra skills. I knew it'd be useful, but I didn't realise how useful that will
Yeah.
be. And that's music to our ears.
Yeah, because if you speak as part of your job, then you shouldn't be, we all have, nobody feels nervous about going to do their job in the morning, usually.
Yeah.
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 Last question, Nadine, and I ask you this as somebody that's been in the events industry pre-COVID, post-COVID, throughout COVID. You had me bringing a television studio and setting it up in your front room in the height of the
Yeah,
COVID
because I was
epidemic.
allowed to. That's right, because I had to do a virtual broadcast, didn't I? And I needed you to be, well, one, you were there to make sure that the doorbell didn't ring when we were doing live
Yes.
broadcast. around the world, but also to help me with my microphone backpack and just be there as a great sounding board as you have been over the years. But yes, it was quite funny because obviously I had to set up my previous property I lived in as a TV studio when TV studios were closed down, and I had to set up 5 cameras, 4 lights, monitors. But actually, if you saw behind the scenes, where usually a professional sound and AV engineers would have beautiful wiring, it was like, walking around, loads of lassos. You had to, I don't know, it was a
It,
health and safety nightmare, wasn't it?
it was that floor was like a spaghetti factory gone wrong. It was terrifying. But my last question to you, Nadine, is how have things changed in the events industry? Maybe since COVID, maybe in the last couple of years. What's changed?
Yeah, so obviously when COVID happened, we suddenly swung, didn't we, to virtual presentations
Mm,
and virtual media interviews, and the face-to-face live events suddenly was dead overnight. And I lost quite a few projects and programs, as did a lot of my other colleagues, including yourself, and the whole events industry had to close down. But I think the last year, and particularly this year, what I'm seeing is that the live events that are face-to-face has come back. The numbers are still not quite the same, although
mm,
actually last year I did a show where we had 700 in the audience. That was my third year running of doing that show. And the first year I did it, it was a hybrid because people were still concerned about coming back to live events. And we had a live audience, but we also had 50% of the audience tuning in. The second year I did that show, it was completely live, and we had about 500. Last year we had 700. I've now handed the baton over after 3 years, and I know that show is going to be even bigger this year, probably attracting about 1,000. But in general, I think numbers are slightly down for most shows, but they are looking healthy.
mm,
I think the events industry is struggling with the cost of living crisis, which has impacted all walks of life, both professionally and personally. And inflation, even though we've got it back under control to a point, although it's gone up to 3% recently, and so it's gone away from that magic 2% mark to
mm,
keep interest rates low. Interest rates are lowering, but I would say that they probably won't go down when you're seeing interest rates as we are at the moment. When you're seeing inflation rates around that 3% mark, and they may go up higher in April. So all of that, without sounding dull and boring, impacts the amount of
mm.
money and budgets people have. So I get this feeling that people want to do more for less. So they still want to achieve the high standards, but they want to do it with less money or the same money. But obviously, that is less money because we're not taking into account inflationary pressures. AI tools are starting to come in on content creation and maybe marketing messages. But a lot of people in the events industry and the wider industries, hearing talks about AI and all its glory, but don't really know how to apply it. So that's a mixed bag at the moment. And actually,
Yeah.
what I love about live events, Ian, is that you can't fake them.
No.
You have to be there in person. And so
Yeah.
there really is a need. There's something about communicating live in person that there's just something magical. You don't get that same level of networking.
Well, the mistake people make with AI is that it will do the job for them, and it won't because it's just a tool. And my line on this is you can buy a £10,000 pair of running shoes, but it won't make you run. They won't make you run a marathon.
Yeah.
And AI won't write the perfect script that connects you with an audience. And a robot won't engage an audience. And if you put two robots in a room together, they're not going to make a sensible decision that you can run your business off the back of. Uh,
No. And then I had to do a speech, a 10-minute speech. And I thought, I haven't used AI to write any of my speeches
yeah.
actually, because I want to bring them from the heart. But one speech I did for 10 minutes, which was up in Leeds for financial services, which covered off financial services, potholes, Beyonce. I thought there's no way AI could have ever come up with the same imagination, but still have relevance and purpose and make the audience laugh. So, as much as I love AI, it is a
It's a
tool.
tool.
It's
It's a,
just a tool.
it's
It's
just a
an
tool.
amazing tool. I am seeing, the metaverse really hasn't taken off, which we thought was a big
Mm,
area. But actually, I still think blockchain is an area of growth that people don't have the expertise and the money for at the moment, but don't write that one off. But in terms of live events, there's some amazing tools out there, but it's always about a balance that if there's too much technology at a live show, then what's the point of being there together?
Completely. And Nadine, this has been fun, but I can't wait for us to get together and go to that QPR game.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
front row, and we'll know the offside rule by the end of it.
That's a challenge. Nadine Dereza, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ian.
Take care. Bye bye.